Call of Duty Modern Warfare is the 16th entry in the series and serves as a reboot for the Modern Warfare subseries. As a reboot, this is one of the best that I've seen from the gaming industry. It's right up there with 2013's Tomb Raider, 2013's DMC Devil May Cry, 2014's Wolfenstein The New Order, 2016's Doom, and 2017's Resident Evil 7. Similar to the original series, the game's setting takes place in modern times and emphasizes realism both in gameplay and in tone. The campaign follows an officer of the CIA, as well as British SAS forces who team with rebels from the Republic of Urzikstan to combat armed forces from the Russian Empire and Urzik terrorists from the fictional group Al-Qatala. So one of the main criticisms against this game was how it framed the Russian army and Russians in general, by extension, as immoral, crazy terrorists who want to dominate other territories and cause havoc across the globe. Funnily enough, this game was released in 2019, and only 3 years later did Russian President Vladimir Putin decide to jumpstart his attempt at reviving old-era Soviet Union territories by invading Ukraine, whom he considers the territory to belong to Russia, despite facts stating otherwise. It's funny how this game correctly frames Russia as a malevolent country just 3 years before the country's president proved just that in the real world on a global stage. But even ignoring that, this isn't the first time Call of Duty has framed Russia as the antagonist in the story for one of these games. 2011's Modern Warfare 3 was about a fictional World War III between the United States and Russia. So why this game received the negative pushback from players, mainly those from Russia, is a head-scratcher at best. Another common critique against Modern Warfare 2019 is the way the game explores and presents certain subject matter, be it casualties of war, which has been seen in other Call of Duty games, or orphans of war, which I think is the main one that triggered many journalists. The mission Hometown, which details the backstory of the character Farah and her brother in their escape from Russian territory, is very abnormal for a Call of Duty mission. The pacing is super slow. Most of your offensive capability is stripped away because you're playing as a child with no trained combat ability. It's scripted in a way that puts it in a different genre, almost coming off as a survival horror experience, and it's rather uncomfortable given the context of what's actually happening in the story, but I think that's the point. Infinity Ward wanted the player to feel something, whether it was a sense of dread or desperation. I believe they wanted to convey a feeling of helplessness with a slither of hope to overcome an impossible task, which is this Russian soldier hunting down children inside this small house. If viewed from that perspective, the mission could be considered one of the best Call of Duty missions, simply for how different it actually is from the standard. There's also an argument to be had that the mission is meandering and too different from a gameplay point of view. Basically, it was extremely risky putting in a mission like this in this game, which is why I appreciate that it's there, even if it seems to be a little too different for its own good. Regarding the overall story, it's one of the best seen in this franchise. The rebooted versions of older characters and the new characters alike all contribute to an interesting mix that finds a way to work. There wasn't a single character that I disliked. Everyone has their own personal motivations, and all the characters have a purpose in the story, including the villains. I would put this within the top 5 Call of Duty campaigns simply for how well crafted the story is. It lives up to the original Modern Warfare without becoming a clone of it. The conclusion of the game is also very strong, ending on a cliffhanger in the form of a tease for more to come, leaving the player with a satisfying ending. Gameplay-wise, there's a great emphasis placed on tactical infiltration, which is handled with careful attention to detail. The realism here is unlike anything Call of Duty has attempted before. It feels authentic storming a building, going from room to room to search for targets while having to make calculated decisions, which the game does grade you on your choices at the end of each stage. It creates for some valuable replayability to see what different choices you could have made at specific moments in certain missions. The slower, more tactical approach to the level design is something that works to the game's strength. It feels like the devs went out of their way to give Call of Duty more depth than what you normally would expect. Some of the newer gameplay elements, such as the ability to defuse tripwires, and especially the ability to mount your gun to nearly any surface in the game, which reduces recoil and greatly improves accuracy, are examples of how the gameplay has been drastically improved. There's some legitimate innovation that happened behind the scenes with this game that I will give Infinity Ward credit for. There wasn't really a single bad mission in this game, but the standouts would have to include Proxy War, which involves close quarters combat along with creative ways to combat the opposing faction with things like remote control airplanes strapped with explosives against helicopters. The Embassy, being one of the longest missions, sees the team escorting a target to be captured and features a rather interesting stealth segment with an unarmed civilian character that reminded me of the scene with Neo being guided by Morpheus in The Matrix. The Wolf's Den, which has the player roaming through dark tunnels filled with explosives, must also combat enemy units using guerrilla tactics, creating this feeling of not knowing what's around the next corner. Captive sees the Farah character in her escape from captivity behind enemy lines, forging her own female resistance force with other prisoners. Old Comrades features a hunt for a single target through the deadly streets of St. Petersburg in Russia. Yet another highlight mission in the campaign. The best mission in the game, however, has to be Going Dark, which easily deserves a top 10 spot on a list for the best Call of Duty campaign missions. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is one of the best contributions from the series' oldest lead development studio, Infinity Ward, and it stands as one of the very best games across the span of the entire series.